Alyssa, it's time. It's finally time.
I feel like we're always like, what was Simba's dad's name?
I
No,
the
Rafiki.
Lion King dude.
It was Rafiki. He was like, it is time. So anytime anyone says it is time, like I literally hear the Lion King in my head. It's fine. Hi.
All I know about the Lion King is the great gif where like he takes Simba and throws him. I think it's funny.
Mufasa. There we go. See, some people remember these things.
So I'm Ed Charbeneau, by the way, and this is Alyssa Nicoll. Welcome to Code It Live. We are here this week to do some SignalR. So we've got some wonderful guests lined up throughout the week. We're going to kick it off here with the one and only David Pine from the Microsoft Docs team over at Microsoft. So he's going to do some overviews of what SignalR is, and he has some demo apps to show and code to share. And then after that, we are going to be live coding the rest of the day, Alyssa and I. David may jump back in from time to time. We might have some surprise guests, who knows. But we are going to try to live code a project, which I think we'll explain after we come back from David's session. And we have content lined up all week long through Friday. Alyssa, anything else you want to share before we bring David in?
We just thought, like, a SignalR week-long stream would be a fun way to celebrate the new year, right? So Ed and other friends have been kind enough to join in to make this happen. So I'm just really excited, and I am from the JavaScript side of life. So if you're joining us and you're like, "What is this .NET world?" you're not alone. We're in this together. So
yeah. So Alyssa, you do primarily JavaScript and CSS. So you're doing something called JavaScript Girl in a .NET world. Is that the right?
Yeah. I'm doing
so this is kind of kicking that off.
I'm diving into the .NET ecosystem and hopefully actually figuring out how it all works and learning how to be a developer on that side of the fence. So I'm really excited. I don't know if SignalR is the right place to start. I feel like there's so many places you could.
I think you're starting in the deeper end of the pool, but that's the way I like to do things myself personally. So I think you're doing it the right way. We also have some prizes. You want to talk about our prizes this week?
Yes.
We have some things to share there too.
Chad is asking me to up my volume, so I'm gonna do that. Let me know if I ever peak or sound, funny. Line out, up. Okay, let me know if that's any better. Surprises. We are going to have, I think it's a quick form that you fill out in order to enter to win the raffle. And at the end of the day, so each day is going to be about 4 hours of streaming. So at the end of the day, we're going to do what do you call it, where you pick from the raffle?
Drawing?
Starting out rough. And we have 3 $50 Amazon gift cards to give away. So I'm really excited about that. So yes, the Nightbot just let everybody know the link in the chat. So make sure you fill that out for a chance to win.
Let's go ahead and bring David in. David, welcome to the show.
Hi, friends. Good morning.
So David, I've known you for quite some time. David and I used to be both Microsoft MVPs before he went to the blue side of things. And once you're a Microsoft employee, you're not allowed to be an MVP anymore. I guess
we're not cool then anymore, I think, right?
I think you finally hit the pinnacle of MVP personality when you become a Microsoft employee. So they just they cut you off. They're like, no more. You're already in the bowl of Kool-Aid. You can't drink here anymore.
Oh, that's a really funny way to put it. I never thought of it that way.
So we're gonna go ahead and give you the floor, David, and let you catch us all up on SignalR. And
sweet.
Enjoy, everybody. Alyssa and I will be back shortly. Whoops, wrong one. There we go. Take care.
Awesome. So I'm assuming that they can still hear me and they'll be able to propagate questions. So during this, at any point in time, if you have questions, feel free to ask them here in Twitch. We are live. I'm happy to kind of bounce around I already see Chris is asking where his pick is. I figured you were going to ask that. I didn't prepare that. I didn't know if you're going to be on the stream today, Chris, but this is Ed and myself when we were in DevRel, Bulgaria. Lots of fun times. So I just wanted to thank Progress Telerik for having me on today. It's an honor to be involved with such an amazing company. I'm super excited for all the amazing things that they're doing. And I'm just happy to be here. So I am David Pine. You may or may not know me. You can follow me on Twitter at DavidPine7. I maintain a blog at davidpine.net. I haven't updated in a long time, to be quite frank. All of the source code that we're going to look at today is on my GitHub at iEvangelist.
I wanted to be here with you to ask questions. So.
Oh, all right. Perfect.
So surprise, I'm back.
What?
Okay. Yeah, I felt like the intro to you was like not good enough. So can you elaborate on this part real quick? So you are an evangelist. Keep going.
Yeah. So I work for the DevRel at Microsoft. And what that means is I basically am responsible for creating various bits of content. So the official title is content developer. So I work on docs.microsoft.com, but I also work on creating video content. We have a live stream. We do the .NET Doc Show, which is every Monday, where we bring on a developer community guest from the .NET community, and we highlight and celebrate them and their ideas and their innovations around the ecosystem. And yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I love the developer community. For me, it's all about developer community. It's fostering it, learning from others, being able to provide and help others. It's something that I really get excited about. So if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag developer community if you ever are curious, have questions, or if you want to share something that's exciting from the community. So we're going to talk about SignalR, and this is kind of a high level. So imagine we're in a plane 20,000 feet. This is SignalR at the high level. Like, what is it?
That is so what I need right now. I'm so excited and relieved to hear you say that.
We're not going to dive right into the weeds, but we will get in the weeds. Trust me. So SignalR, to be clear, SignalR, and Alyssa, you had actually asked this when we first joined. You had asked, how old is SignalR? And SignalR, the concept of SignalR, real-time web with .NET has been around for roughly 7 or 8 years, I believe. So with ASP.NET Framework, and feel free to correct me in the chat if you're more familiar with the original framework implementation. But SignalR from Framework was around for a very long time. And then as .NET Core was introduced, that's the open source cross-platform version of .NET, it was rebranded and rewritten, and it's called SignalR Core, but we'll still just call it SignalR, and people get confused with that. But that's a clear distinction. It's cross-platform, open source, and a lot more performance. So,
is there a lot of people, would you say, because it kind of reminds me of the switch from AngularJS to Angular, and how like 1.0, right, was AngularJS, and it really was a rewrite. It wasn't like an upgrade if you were going to go past that point. And so, is it like the same way with SignalR? Would you say that if someone's like, I'm a SignalR developer, do you think they probably mean SignalR Core, or do you think there's a lot of development still going on in the OG?
There is. So that's a really good question, Alyssa. And I can definitely relate to the AngularJS pains. And I think that naming things and versioning things is very, very difficult in software programming, as we've proven time and time again. There still is a very large share of developers who are using the older technologies. There's lots of developers that are kind of not necessarily stuck, but just still using .NET Framework, and that's perfectly okay. So they would be using the older version of .NET of SignalR. And I think the same is true with Angular. I think there's still lots of Angular devs out there that are old school, right? I was one of those, and then I grew up. And I moved away from JavaScript.
There's been a lot of like companies still using it, and so I don't think it's always up to the developer necessarily which framework or which product or technology that you're using. But it's Kev Griff in the one Kev Griff said, I totally got in trouble for calling it SignalR Core.
You'll get
what?
Well, like, don't you get in trouble like when you say
Angular J, like if you don't call it
Mhm.
Angular JS, if you just call all of it as a whole Angular, yeah,
Right.
you get in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. So people get in trouble for calling things, and it's just, that's what it is. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, SignalR Core, to be very specific. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that now, but I call it SignalR here. So we know what we're talking about. We're talking about the newer stuff. So what this does is it provides real-time web functionality. So to be clear, imagine you have, like, if you look at the web as a whole, the way it's evolved was initially it started off with just static HTML. And then JavaScript was introduced. So then you would kind of go in and sprinkle in like event handlers. Like, okay, this document, the static document has a button, and that button now you click on it and we have to handle that event. Like, what's it going to do? So there's going to be some sort of functionality. So JavaScript was born, and then you would style it and right. So that was kind of like the evolution. But then you ended up having, servers and clients. And then at what point in time, where do you get this real-time functionality? Instead of having like a request and response, from a client to a server, real-time web functionality is basically such that you open up a continuous form of communication. And with SignalR, there's an initial negotiation. And once that channel is opened up, it's real time. So the client can actually push to the server, and the server can push to the client. It's a duplex channel. So the client can receive things from the server unsolicited. So it doesn't have to, you can basically sign up and get callbacks and say, once the server pushes me this payload, I'll handle it. Likewise, I can push things to it, and it's just real time. It's as quickly as you, so think of like,
you'd be responsible for like closing that channel as well at the end of the day when it's time. Or can you just be like end program?
yeah, close tab, right? If you're using a browser, right? So yeah, same type of scenario. Yeah. And so some of the different use cases for that are, you'll think like stock tickers, chat applications is the big one. And I'm going to go into chat, and chat, every time people see a SignalR chat application, it's that big moment of sighing, like, oh, we've seen this chat demo countless times, but I promise you that this one is unlike the original Microsoft ones that you saw that is dull and boring. I promise. So there's lots of benefits though. So like, I've got kids, and I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but if you've ever gone on a road trip, it's that mindset of, are we there yet? And that's the way that the request response pipeline was really set up with web historically, was you would say, well, if there's this information, the client would say, are we there yet? Do you have this information? Do you have this information? Do you have this information? And that's more of like a polling mindset. And it's SignalR kind of alleviates that. Because instead of saying, are we there yet? It's like the parents are going to tell you when we're there. And as soon as we're there, you'll know. Or you'll get updates like the parents, we're 5 miles away. Now we're 3 miles away. Please shut up. Right? So the use cases are real time, all the things. Anything that you can think of that's real time, this is a use case for it. I'm actually currently developing, in addition to all the other SignalR fun stuff I'm working on, I'm rewriting and I'm creating Battleship. I'm calling it Warfleet to avoid any type of copyright or trademark infringements, but it basically lets you go into a lobby, and the lobby is wired up with SignalR, and there's real-time communication between the clients, any of the connected clients in the server, and you can create a game, and you'll see when people creates a game, and then you can join that game, and you can either spectate or play. And then once you play, you have to place your ships, and then you start calling out shots, and like the placement of the board and the players and all those interactions are in real time, right? So you get to see when someone fires on your board, and you get communication of whether or not they hit and missed. And this is just one of those use cases. It's everywhere you want to be. That's just a cheesy bullet at the end there. We'll ignore that one. So
is that like a SignalR slogan or something?
No, it's definitely, I think I borrowed that from like a TV commercial, and it sounded good at the time of writing. So there's various platforms. And by that, I mean that, when SignalR is running, you have a server. The server is .NET, .NET Core in this case. And it can be, in a web farm, anywhere where .NET Core can run. So it can be in Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, your own web servers, or you can have it running in Azure, right? So you can have Azure service. There's a SignalR service for that. So the various platforms are the client libraries. So there's several that Microsoft maintain and provide out of the box, and there's some third-party implementations as well. So there's a JavaScript client. I have parentheses around IE 11 because if you're using anything before IE 11, I'm very sorry. You'll probably want to use .NET framework SignalR rather than the latest stuff here. There's also a .NET client. And that means with the .NET client, since it's written in .NET Core, it's cross-platform. So you can use it on iOS and Android. So Xamarin Mobile apps, things like that. There's a Java client because we drink our coffee. There's a C++ and Swift. So there's third-party implementations of those client libraries as well. So it's literally, like I said, everywhere.
Okay, can we pause real quick and when you okay, this is gonna be really dumb because like again, I live in the CSS, right?
There's no dumb questions. No dumb questions.
Okay, when you're talking about all of these clients, do you mean server like Azure, or are you talking about what Azure is working with? What?
So when I say clients, I mean with SignalR, there's two different paradigms. There's the server, which is like the hubs, where we'll get more into that in a second. But the server is what basically opens up the proxy between the server and the client. And the client is your application. So if you're an Angular developer, for example, Alyssa, you write an Angular application. Imagine you have some endpoints, some HTTP calls you're going to make and you're going to get some data. But imagine that you want to create real-time web functionality for your Angular application, right? You want to get some notifications maybe, right? Or you want to introduce chat. You would take on the JavaScript client, and then you would open up a connection from your client to that server. And then you could go, real line of communication, in real time back and forth.
Okay. And so whenever you're saying that all of these other things also provide, is that as of only core, like only the new stuff?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not actually sure. I think so, yeah, because a lot of it, so with the .NET framework stuff, the legacy stuff, we'll call it, it did have a JavaScript client and it did have a .NET client. I don't think it had Java. I'm not sure about the others.
The other flavors. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But
Thank
I mean,
you.
that's old stuff. We're not going to, no, this is great. All right. So let's take a look. So there's a bunch of very common nomenclature that exists with like the server side bits that you're writing. So when you create, like from within Visual Studio, if you do file new project and you do any, .NET core template, if you're doing like a web application, for example, there's the notion of a startup class, and the startup class allows you to wire up all of your dependency injection. Okay. So what it basically does is there's configure services and configure, and both of those are where we'll add SignalR. So we're inside the services, we're going to say add SignalR. So what that does is it basically wires up all of our middleware, all of the required services for SignalR to be available on our server. And then in configure, we have various endpoints. So the endpoints, we're going to specify that we're using endpoints, and we're going to map it to our chat hub. And our chat hub is basically just a class that is a subclass of hub, which is a type given from .NET. And then we're mapping it to this endpoint /chat. So what that allows clients to do is connect to that endpoint, and then it opens up that hub communication, right? So basically those single lines of, those several lines of code allow you to kind of create a SignalR endpoint.
But where did they come from? Did we npm install them? Like what? Where did
did we npm install them? So npm, that's the node module package manager, right?
It's where all things outside of me come from.
Exactly. So the same is true with NuGet. So inside the context of a .NET application, you have NuGet, which is our world, our vision of what npm is to JavaScript developers, all the things outside of us. But we can also publish packages to it and consume them, same way you can with npm. So out of the box, you get a lot of this stuff for free. It comes out of the box. So the chat hub is something that you'll write yourself, and then you'll wire it up as such. But the DLLs, or the packages in this case, are coming from NuGet.
Okay, cool.
So now we have to be, cloud first. We have to think about the cloud all the time. So one of the questions is, if, we have our web server that we're writing, same if you're writing like a Node.js application, your web server, if you're going to open up a channel of communication that's allowing WebSocket, right? You're having potentially 50,000 clients trying to connect to you at the same time. That's a lot of IO concerns. So you can actually offload that with Azure. You can add Azure SignalR. And there's that. So it's basically just a package and an extra line. And that may have changed recently, but it's very, very simple to add that. And then you have a connection string, and all of those concerns of SignalR running within the context of your web server are now offloaded into Azure. So you get scalability and, all those kind of potential performance implications are alleviated, so to speak. And then for configuring that with the cloud, there's no changes. It's literally the same thing, right? Which is simple and straightforward. So there's different transports, and transports are, it's the way that the server will communicate to the client. And as part of the handshake or the negotiation, there's that transport is actually automatically chosen based on the best possible, either, the clients can configure what they're capable of, or the server can configure its preferred. Ideally, you'll start off with WebSockets. If that's unavailable, it'll actually fall back to server sent events. If that's unavailable, you'll fall back to long polling. And SignalR framework originally had forever frame, and that has since been removed. It's no longer needed, or they didn't implement it, I guess. So yeah, WebSockets is the underlying kind of transport technology that exists for SignalR real-time, and that's really the preferred way. So we talked about hubs. We showed how you wire up a hub. So what is a hub? A hub is it's the proxy between the server and the client. It's basically identifying the endpoints and all of the functionality that a client can call into the server, and what a server can push then to a client. And hubs are pretty straightforward. They have some generic implementations of invoking different methods. They can be named. There's actually a way to get rid of those string literals, or the verbatim strings within.
Oh, cool. Did you see what Kevin Griff said about Forever Frame?
Forever Frame was an old IE tech. Nice. Okay, I was not even familiar with that. I just know that they dropped support for Forever Frame, so that's good. That makes me feel a lot better, because anything that came from IE, goodbye. All right. So magic strings. One of the things about magic strings are, if you're a programmer, a lot of people are afraid of them. We all do it. We're all guilty of having string literals, and but you can actually get rid of them on the server, and you can have strongly typed hubs. And I actually have my implementation of that is using strongly typed hubs, and I'll show you the alternative way. But it's really nice, because since we are using a strongly typed programming language, it'd be nice to have that type of statement completion and understanding of the contracts between our hubs.
Okay, so to reiterate, the hub sits between the server and the client, and it is not a strongly typed string, or it's strongly typed. It is not a magic string, right?
It can be. There's a generic version, and I'm actually showing the generic version here. So if we look at our chat hub, this would be like the broadcast method that exists on it. So we can broadcast a message, which is just a string, and we would walk up to all of our clients. So at this point, we're saying all of the clients that are currently connected to our hub, any and all of them, we could send a message called broadcast, and see how it's using a string literal.
Yeah.
When we use strongly typed hubs, we would have a method called broadcast, rather than this generic send async and then passing it a string, right? So that's a way for us to send a message. We broadcast it. That's why I call it broadcast, because you're sending it out to everyone, even yourself. And the way that looks is if you've got me, Dave, being the sender, I send a message to the chat hub. The chat hub sits here on the server, and it then propagates a message back out to all connected clients. So Maggie, Carol, Rachel, Maria, Max, Steve, and even our bot if it's connected. So now we have the notion of an echo, right? So we can actually walk up to the client who is the caller. So I can send a message and get an acknowledgement back that I sent that message. So there's a way to say clients has caller. It has clients actually has lots of different little things that kind of isolate groups and users, and we're going to look at all of those. This is a way to do an echo, right? So you'd send a message, echo, and if you subscribed on the client to echo, when you send this message from your client, that event handler that you wired up on your client would actually get called with the message that you sent, but no one else would see it. And the way that looks is Dave sends a message to the chat hub. The chat hub then sends the message to the connected client, which is me, the caller. That's very common. I direct message myself all the time, actually. I'm a lonely individual.
You make jokes, but some people keep to-dos by texting themselves.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I send myself so many emails. It's embarrassing. My Gmail is just me. It's like, well, I'm pretty self-entitled here. That's ridiculous. So we've got the option to send to others. So from our clients and our hub, you can walk up to others. Others is everyone else besides you, whoever the caller is of this. So you can say send to others, send them a message, everyone except me, right? So Dave sends a message, see how the arrow doesn't come back to me. So it goes to the hub, and then from the hub sends it to all connected clients. And then we can send to a group. So imagine like group text messaging, or if you belong to a different group of individuals. So you can walk up to a group that has a name, right? There's different group names. They can be an identifier, some sort of string verbatim, or a GUID, globally unique identifier, whatever it is. So if you're in a group, you'll get this message. If you're not in the group, you won't. So the way that looks is Dave sends a message to UX, and whoever's in that UX group, they'll receive the message. So imagine like in a chat application, you have the notion of rooms where you create a room, and then anyone that joins that room, then they'll get those messages within the context of that room. Same type of thing. So this is how you do that with SignalR. It's a group. You can do direct messages. So if you have a user's identity, you can walk up to their user ID and say, I'm going to send them a message. And this is how like direct messages would work, right? Same type of thing. So Dave is the sender. I send it to the chat hub, and I was messaging Maria. She's a dev, and she'll get the message, but no one else will. Right. So those are some of the different ways that you can use a hub to communicate and isolate different forms of communication. And those messages aren't limited to just strings. You can literally parameterize them however you want. It's generic. You can have full-blown objects. You can serialize entire hierarchies and object graphs, whatever it is you want to send.
Would you say that no matter what you're doing in SignalR, you're using a hub or no?
Yes, a hub is one of the required aspects of SignalR. Okay. So we talked about the transports. We talked a bit about hubs and different messaging formats. Now there's the notion of protocols. So once you open up that form of communication, if you're using server-sent events, or you're using WebSockets, whatever it is, what's the underlying protocol that communication is going to serialize your information? So the default out of the box is JSON. So that's JavaScript object notation. It's text-based, so it's human readable. And that's the way I have my app set up now, but I'm going to show you how easy.
You know what JSON stands for?
Do you not do
I know what JSON is. I don't know what it stands for. Like, your brain, it's beautiful. Keep going.
Yeah, JSON, JavaScript object notation. So basically that's how you describe your objects in JavaScript, right? And it's text-based, so it's human readable. So you get to see those various bits. Now, message pack is binary. And one of the key advantages to using message pack is if there's no reason for you as the client to actually examine some of the WebSocket communication, for example, and look at that human readable bits, you might want to prefer using a message pack, because binary is roughly like 60% the size of JSON. So I don't remember the exact calculation, but it's very, very much more performant. And especially if you're super heavy with lots of communications and whatnot, binary is probably the way to go. There's also Blazor pack, and this is kind of a hidden. That's why I've got this little incognito mystery man of purple. Blazor pack is a hidden protocol that I learned about the hard way before my presentation in Bulgaria at DevReach 2019. And I remember spending a lot of time with Brady Gaster, remoting and talking to him over Teams. And we had some difficulty because one of the issues that we had experienced was I was trying to do Blazor with SignalR, but Blazor server-side actually creates SignalR out of the box. And the way it was registering it was a singleton. So I couldn't register my own hub because Blazor already had one. And there was this weird kind of bug under the covers that we unearthed. And so you'll never actually have the protocol Blazor pack yourself. Just know that it exists, and that bug has since been fixed.
But is there a default protocol, or are you always having to tell it which one?
No. So out of the yes, there is a default. You don't have to tell it. So the default is JSON. You can opt into message pack, and if you're using Blazor server side, there's SignalR that exists that's being used under the covers for the SignalR or for the Blazor server side Delta updates, and it uses Blazor pack.
Okay.
So then performance, these are some older benchmarks that exist, and I can share those links later on, but ASP.NET Core and SignalR benchmarks performance, just know that it's insane how much faster it's getting. Tech Empower does a bunch of the basically benchmarking and comparing, requests per second and stuff like that. And at one point in time, I remember that framework, like, .NET framework was really, really slow. Like it was sub 1 million, requests per second, and Node.js was up there in like the 2 million requests per second, which is, we were at the time, .NET framework developers looked at Node.js and was like, ooh, that's really appealing because that's really, really performant. Well, in the trial run of benchmark 19, we ASP.NET Core has surpassed 7.3 million requests per second. And with .NET 5, some of the preemptive looks are over 11 million requests per second. So blazing fast.
So you're saying you don't need Node anymore?
Yeah, well, I guess the question is, did you ever? Yeah. And another cool thing is they've actually formalized specifications. So when SignalR was originally written, the specs for it were like on a napkin, right? It was really non-existent. But now with the protocols and the transports, all the different message based things here, the RPC, all that stuff, there's specifications. So you can actually go implement your own if you're curious, because it's formalized. All of those contracts, all of the ways that all the bits going across the wire, everything's formalized now, and it's written down, and it's comprehensive, and it's nice that it's kind of matured so much that there are specs for it. So now the fun part, that is the demo. So the demo is a rewrite. So I promised that it's not going to be this boring app. So if you've seen some of the chat applications that have existed for Blazor, for SignalR, there was no authentication. It was you just typing in a name and opening up another browser and another client typing in a name and then sending messages back and forth. And it was, kind of boring. So I took it a step further. When I initially wrote this, I wrote it with ASP.NET Core and Vue.js to get the updates from, the HTML using Vue, which is a little SPA framework, which is kind of nice. Again, just sprinkling in bits of JavaScript. But I got ambitious earlier this week when I was talking with Ed, and I was up late last night trying to debug some weird situations because I decided to rewrite this app entirely in Blazor WebAssembly. So I did that. And there was lots of really, really fun things I discovered along the way. So when you do file, project, new project, and you choose the Blazor WebAssembly, there's multiple options. And the wizard walks you through, you can have, Blazor server side or Blazor WebAssembly. I chose WebAssembly. You can choose hosted. So when you do hosted versus standalone, hosted means that ASP.NET Core is actually serving up your Blazor instance rather than standalone, which starts itself and is more kind of self-sufficient. So I did server side, and the reason was I knew I was going to be doing SignalR application. So I have my server bits here, and I have a shared library. The nice thing about Blazor is it's literally running C# in the client browser. So historically, that was only available, JavaScript, but with the advent of WebAssembly, you can now think of your browsers, and this is the way I like to think of it. You can think of your browsers more as like an app store rather than just a place to navigate to sites, right? Imagine being able to do video editing from your browser. WebAssembly makes that sort of stuff possible because it's a lot more performant, and you get a lot more capabilities because with WebAssembly, you can run Rust, C++, imagine running CAD, AutoCAD from your browser. That's stuff that you can do with it, right? Or game engines, things like that. So WebAssembly is really taking the browser and kind of flipping it on its head. So we get to run C#. And with C#, since it's a strongly typed language, we have the notion of shared libraries. So the server that is C# can define some contracts, and let's just start looking at some of those real quick. So enter .NET 5 and C# 9. So we get the notion of records. So these are simple classes. We get equality, comparison, semantics. We get deconstructors. We get all of this boilerplate code from simply saying public record and then our class. So we get public init only properties for a user string on a class called actor. And then we can subclass that. We've got a message here. So we've got a public record actor message that identifies by an ID. It's got text, it's got the user, and then it's, as I mentioned, a subclass of actor. And we got some different bits here for whether or not it's editing and stuff like that. And this is going to represent our message object in our application. And then we have some other things we'll get into in just a second. So from the server, I'm going to show you that when we have our, well, first of all, let's look at the program. So the program is the entry point of our application. And again, with .NET 5 and C# 9, we get some newer features. One of those is top-level statements. So with top-level statements, our huge templated entry point before that had a program and a main entry point, all that boilerplate is now gone. Instead, we get 8 lines of elegant code where we define some using statements, some libraries that we're relying on, some namespaces rather. And then we're going to await the creation of our host. We're going to configure it with our startup. We're going to build it and then run it. And then our startup, this is again where we talk about all of that very common nomenclature for wiring up dependency injection. So our server has all of these services. We're going to add response compression. So for the octet, so this is the octet stream. This is some of the binary bits for Blazor and SignalR. So we're going to specify that we want those to be compressed. We're going to add a bit of identity server and authentication stuff. That's less important, so I'm going to kind of zip past that. And then we're going to add SignalR down here at the bottom. And I say enable detailed errors because I'm a developer and I like looking at things in a detailed view rather than skimming over potential concerns. So this is still very active development. And then I'm also going to say add message pack protocol. So clients can still choose to use SignalR with JSON. This is just simply adding message pack protocol as an available protocol to be available, right? And then down here, we're going to say use compression, use a few more things, and then we're going to specify using endpoints. And down here is where we specify the mapping of our hub. So our chat hub is mapped to the endpoint chat. And if we go into our chat hub, it's a strongly typed hub of iChat client. So this is an interface that specifies a few things that we want our hub to do. One of those things is to basically pass an actor, which is our user in this case, when they've logged on, when they've logged off, an action so we know when they're typing, right? So you've seen chat applications before where you're waiting on the edge of your seat and you see like a little ellipsis, right? You see that the user is typing and you're like, ooh, what are they going to say? And then they stop and you're mad. You're like, oh, what are they going to type? So I've added that capability to this app as well. And then obviously a message received. So
like for read receipts?
Not read receipts. That's actually a good idea. We should add that as well. Not during this session though, but that's a good idea to add. Yeah, because you could do that for groups or users or anything. That's not a bad idea. Message received is basically just saying this is this will occur when a message is sent. So as you on the client, you send a message, you wire up, and here's the message that comes through. So then what do you do with the message? So, all right, so that's the server side, not super exciting.
Is actor like a common term for user?
I chose it. I don't know if it's super common or not.
I just didn't know if that was like, this is how we do it on the .NET side of life. And I'm like,
no. So, well, I had a property on the object called user. So I didn't want to say user.user. So I just said actor. I don't know.
I will be nesting users all day long. Just to let you know, that's how I roll.
Oh, I love it. So what we do here is when our hub, there's a lot more fun stuff here too. So when the hub, when someone connects to it, we're going to walk up to the caller and we're going to say message received, and we're going to pass a greeting to that user. And we're going to say that it's a greeting and everyone's happy. And we're going to say to the others, everyone else that's already connected, we're going to let them know that this user logged on, right? So then you can get notifications when other people log on, right?
Oh, we just got raided. Thanks for the raid, Jeff.
Sweet. Also, we can signify when someone's disconnected. So like when we can tell all the other people that someone logged off, right? So like you had mentioned, Alyssa, like how do we end this? Like if you're in your client browser and you close the tab, that disconnected event will fire and people will know that so-and-so logged off. Okay. So then we can post a message. This is, notice that this is a method that takes a message string and an ID, and we'll say, well, we're going to call everyone and say message received. And then we pass in that message. Then we can signify people are typing. So, I mean, this is 60 lines of code for a pretty advanced hub that does a lot of stuff, but very, I guess, tersely. It's not super verbose. There's not a ton of complexity here. There are some other things, you know, I've got a command signal, and I'll talk about that in a second once we get further into actually running the demo. But let's go look at the client bits because those are a little bit more exciting. So in the client, we are just doing all of our standard WebAssembly startup stuff. And then we've got some shared components. And if you're unfamiliar with Razor, Razor is essentially the
Blazor HTML.
Yes. So Razor, sort of, it's C# HTML. So the Razor view engine looks at CS HTML and Razor files very, very similarly. So what it does is it allows you to mix, and it's not really a preference of mine, but it allows you to mix HTML and C# kind of together as like a templating engine.
Okay.
So we have our main layout. So this is where our body will render. And then we have our index, and our index is very, very simple. So we've got an authorized view and a chat room, and we pass in our user. So once we're in the context of an authorized view, we've got this authentication state where we have our user, which is our claims principal in .NET, and we can pass it to our chat room. So our chat room has several kind of little sections to it. The first is our messages container, and then we've got at the bottom an input for our text message, and then a button to send it, and then our voice settings. So I'm going to show you some of those things real quick. So, was there a question?
No.
Well, I piqued your interest because now we're looking at HTML, and you're like, ooh.
I just didn't know that those were collapsed at all. You're blowing my. What is this? Is this Visual Studio Code or is this VS? Wait.
Well, so you can do that in both. Visual Studio Code also allows for collapsing.
Okay. I was like, oh, there's a lot there. Okay.
Yeah, it's not very. There's a lot more. Yeah. So if it's fully collapsed, we got 127 lines. So
Okay.
is it a lot? Is it? So we have, well, before I go too much further, I just want to show you that we do have a shadowed component. So we have our chat room.razor, and beneath it, we have a chat room.razor.cs, which is our C# file. And this actually needs to be, Ed actually shared this with me, or maybe it was Corey Weathers. I couldn't remember. Someone who's far more advanced with Blazor than I am showed me this. And I was like, oh, that's what I've been trying to do for so long. But basically you specify a class that is the same name as this Razor file, because under the covers, Razor, the view engine, is actually creating a class for you anyways, named chat room. So it has to be partial. So once you have this partial chat room, then you can just do all the C# fun stuff that you'd want to do. You can have parameters, you can inject things, and then this is the real meat of it, is you can wire up SignalR. So we have a hub connection builder. So when this component, the chat room, is initialized, we're going to instantiate a hub connection builder. We're going to say with URL, and we have this navigation. C#, I do miss you sometimes. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So we have this to absolute URI. So remember, this is that chat endpoint that we specified in our server. So this is from our client saying we want to connect to that. That's our URL. And we have a way to say with automatic reconnect. So if ever that communication falters or falls apart or whatever happens to it, it'll automatically reconnect. And I commented out the adding a message protocol, because I'm going to show you during the demo that we can look at the JSON over the wire.
Yeah, you're really confusing me with the different clients can have different protocols. Everybody's free and willy-nilly. Like
yeah, it's that's what it is. It's like the World Wide Web, a free floating.
I don't like it. Make them all the same.
Well, I mean, to be fair, if you come from an Angular background, it's very much prescribed, right? So it's you do it this way or you die, right? I mean, so there's more choices, and I think it's nice to have those choices, and it might be a bit overwhelming, especially to new people coming to .NET. And as Ed did mention at the very beginning of the show, having SignalR being your starting point for .NET is jumping into the deep end of the pool. There's lots of very, very, I could talk about this for days. Maybe I'll join you guys tomorrow and the day after. So during our hub connection, we're going to say that on message receive, and we're going to specify this callback on user typing, user logged in, and then we're going to start our connection. So we have these little callbacks for when those things occur. So for example, when a message is received on the client, we'll have that actor message. And notice this is the same strongly typed object that we had defined or that we're using in our server, because we have that shared library. And since it's .NET, we can use both those models in both places. And it gets deserialized, and ta-da, we have our thing. So then what I'm actually doing here is we're going to scroll into view, and we're going to speak. So we actually have JavaScript interop, where we can call from C# into JavaScript. And I'll show you some of that stuff, but let's just show you the app running real quick, because it's a little bit more fun to look at.
C# and JavaScript can be buddies.
Yeah. And actually, in this demo, I have C# calling into JavaScript, and I have JavaScript calling into C#.
Whoa.
Yeah, lots of fun things. All right, so the app is going to fire up, and our authentication is going to load here, and it's going to say you're either connected or you're not, or authenticated rather. And if I'm authenticated, remember, once I'm connected, SignalR will send me this initial message. So this is our initial message into our chat. It says, hi, David Pine. This chat application is powered by SignalR, blah, 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 blah. Cool. Oh, wait, look, there's commands for chatbots. That's interesting. So I can do jokes and or joke singular. There's dad. Well, let's just test this first. Testing anyone home, right? Oh, and I can type. So that's me typing. That's great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up another browser real quick. I'm going to open up Chrome over here, and I'm going to log in to Chrome on the same instance on my machine. I don't have this published anywhere, so it's not like you can have multiple people right now, but I can do it for demonstration purposes. I can chat with myself, which is, again, very, very lonely times. But let's log in. I'm going to pull this over here. Actually, let's bring it like this. Log in. Let's just go. That's Twitter. So let's just do, yeah, that's fine. Authorize app.
You got all legit with your authorizing.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't, I kind of wanted to do that. So look at, now I got a notification over here on this one that someone else logged in, right? So what I can do is over here, I can say, it's me. And see over here on this one, you see that David Pine is typing, right? So you get basically the fact that I'm typing over here.
Oh, yes, I see it. I was like,
right?
Where is it?
Because I'm typing over there. I'm typing in a different browser, and it's sending that over SignalR and letting the other clients know that I'm typing, right? So I'm logged in with the same user on both. So it's me, great, it's testing, awesome. So let's just do this. I'm going to close this one real quick, log out, and then you'll see up here that that one logged out, right? So I got a notification over there. Since I'm so alone in this chat room, I actually added a chat bot. And what that bot does is ASP.NET hosted, since it's hosted with ASP.NET Core, we can actually have a background service. So it runs on our web server, and that background service allows me to kind of process command signals. So I know a few things about this chat. So I can say a joke, let's do a dad joke first. And then we'll just post that. And it says the dad joke bot is.
The other day, my wife asked me to pass her lipstick, but I accidentally passed her a glue stick. She still isn't talking to me.
Okay, there's a lot I need to unpack here.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I added voice, right? So we can speed it up a little bit here. We got voice.
Is that the browser? What's going on?
Yeah. So this is all native through the browser. And this is so let's do a Chuck Norris one real quick. Joke. And well, the other thing is I got really crazy and I added translation. So I can do for our Bulgarian friends. Let's do Bulgarian. So I'm going to say joke, Chuck Norris. This is hitting the Chuck Norris rather than the dad joke service. And we're going to do Bulgarian. So it's going to type.
Chuck Norris nie использовал движение.
Shut up.
Более учтиво за негова помощь.
I got to do this in Bulgaria live, and I had the Chuck Norris bot running on loop, pulling up different nerdy jokes for Chuck Norris. I mean, if you just do Chuck Norris with no specifier, it'll just use English, right, which is your native local.
Chuck Norris doesn't use Oracle. He is the Oracle.
So it's all these really nerdy jokes, and it's amazing. But yeah, so the way this works is SignalR is examining those messages, my hub is, and I have a hosted service that sits there, and it will listen for command signals. So there's special syntax that I can use from my browser, much like you would with Slack, where you can have those like little, I am supposed to be live tweeting, but I can't have on the floor. That's awesome. So I'll show you how that works real quick. The speech stuff is pretty slick. So from our client, we have some interop. And so like I said, we have, so this is the Blazor WebAssembly client. We inject the iJavaScript runtime. So our WebAssembly instance has a way to communicate with JavaScript, right? So I can walk up to JavaScript from here. And what I do is I say JavaScript speak async. And speak async is an extension method on my runtime. And I call app.speak, right?
Does this only work in one browser?
No. So here's the cool thing. If I have multiple browsers open, if I have all the browsers open, any client that's connected to this, when my app is published, you can go in there and do jokes. If you do jokes plural instead of singular, it'll just continuously start pumping out jokes every, it'll delay. And it'll broadcast those jokes and speak them to everyone.
Okay.
So what it does is app.speak, and there's a bit of JavaScript because I like JavaScript. Everyone likes JavaScript. So on the window, we register a .app. And we have some methods here. Well, this first method is speak, and it's defined as taking a message, a default voice, the voice speed, and the language. And speech synthesis utterance is actually native to your browser. Like that's nothing, I didn't, have to do anything there. So I'm going to pull over a browser and show you this real quick. So if I just hit F12 in a browser, I'm not even navigating to anything. This is just native stuff sitting here. So if I go to console, I can do speech. I can press all the buttons. Close.
Command
stop.
Option I for those of you on the Mac side of life.
Just want to jump in and ask real quick, David, do you think that is part of the browser's accessibility is where that comes from?
I don't know. I just know that it was standardized a little while ago, but there's a speech synthesis object that exists in your client browser. You can, any modern browser. So as part of that, let's clear this out real quick. So as part of that, if you do speech synthesis.getVoices, it's an empty array. If you do it again, it's an empty array. If you do it again, eventually, is it not working? It doesn't work. I lied. I'm a liar. Totally a liar. Even though I showed you this before. But no, I promise you it's there. It's available.
I'm going to try it in my browser.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and do some research. I'm under just my gut assumption, thinking that that's part of the built-in screen reader capabilities of the browsers. I'm wondering if that's where it comes from.
Here in Chrome.
Yeah, look. So it's an experimental. This is an experimental technology. Check your browser compatibility table. Blah 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 blah. Here's the different properties. So, anyways, I'm using this thing to do speech utterances, and
that's so cool.
So, so what it does is it instantiates an utterance. It gets the available voices. It specifies the voice, sets the volume, and then the rate, and then it says.
Why did it only read your joke?
What else did you want it to read?
Didn't you talk to yourself before and it didn't?
Mm-hmm. So that's a really good observation. You're absolutely right. So as these messages come through, I have a check here. So if message is from a chatbot and we specify it to say the joke. So things that are from the command signal specify those bits to be true. Otherwise, standard communications are not. So then you could just basically collapse this. And what happens is nothing, right? Your messages just update and then you see your messages like a regular chat app. So it's a way to add a bit of insanity.
That's a really long one. Do you have a message receipt? If not, is there the side client approach another way, server side, to know who got messages?
So yes, that's a really good question. And Alyssa, you had alluded to this a bit earlier. It's not there now. The way I would probably approach implementing that is as messages are received right here in this event, I would then have another thing that goes back out to the SignalR hub. So this is on the client, right? So when the client receives the message, the client would then say, I received this message. And then the server would have that information, and whoever else was concerned about seeing that read receipt could get notified that it was read. Okay. So yeah, we're close to, well, actually that's already an hour. Holy cow. Oh.
I know. I asked a lot of questions, so feel free to go over.
No, I feel like there's lots of things to unpack here. Like I said, I promised that this would be a lot more of an advanced chat application. There's a lot more things that are going on here. Like we've incorporated, besides just being Blazor, WebAssembly, we have interop examples. We have interop JavaScript going into C#, C# going into JavaScript.
So you keep saying that word. I actually wrote down a list of words that you said that I didn't know what they meant.
What interop?
Yeah.
So that's what so let me show you this real quick too. So there's a way to get client voices, and that's when do I have it? I have it running. So when I open up this modal, these are coming from the browser, the client browser, right? Yeah. But how does my Blazor WebAssembly app know about these names, right? So how are these available options for the voice? The way that's possible is through interop. So our C# calls into get client voices. We walk up to our JavaScript runtime and we say get client voices. So back over here in JavaScript, we have a function obviously called get client voices, and it's actually taking a .NET object. I'm passing in my object reference of that chat room component into JavaScript so that it can call back into me later on once it has those voices available.
Where's the interop part though?
Well, that is the interop because it's going from C#. So this is C# right here.
Yes.
Right. So public static async value task of string, get client voices. So this is the iJavaScript runtime is basically, it's a Microsoft JavaScript interop wrapper around the JavaScript runtime. So since you're running in C# in WebAssembly in the browser, this represents the communication between your WebAssembly C# instance to JavaScript in the same browser tab.
Okay, cool.
So then we have this JavaScript that's running, and it says here is this functionality that it defines. So this functionality can still be called from JavaScript. If I open up my console, I can call into these objects because they exist in JavaScript anyways, right? But it's just a way for those two things to call into one another. And since I have an instance of the .NET object here, I can actually invoke a method asynchronously called update client voices once we have them. So that's the interop part.
So whenever you're going from C# to JavaScript, does your JavaScript have to go back into C# for actions to happen in the browser, or can you just fire off actions as normal in JavaScript at that point?
Both. It depends on what you're trying to do. So this one's a bit more advanced because it takes an object and it calls back into C#, but you don't have to do that. It could just return something. So this one's just like a fire and forget. So from so when the chat room fires up, my input down at the bottom, I want it to focus, right? So normally in JavaScript, if you're using Vue or Angular or whatever, there's like a focus functionality because you have a reference to that DOM element. So you would say element focus. Well, the way you do that with Blazor is you pass in the ID for your element and you say, get the element by ID and then focus on it. If it's not, if it's truthy.
It's a really good example, except in .NET 5, they added it to Blazor. So you don't need to do that anymore.
How do you do that? How do you do that?
I'd have to look it up, but I know it was added in .NET 5.
You're saying what? The ability
to focus, probably?
Was added, or the ability to have an element without its ID? What do you mean, Ed?
What do you mean, Ed?
That
Come on.
focus example that you gave, they actually added that to the framework, so you can call it from the input itself. I'm trying to find the docs on it now. I know they added it.
Oh, okay. Salt, real quick. Not Salt. Sorry, David. I just called you Salt. There was a question by Sheriff earlier, and I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, I've got it queued up. I can bring it into the window. That was a really good question.
Well, I would love to also know what
gRPC.
There we go. There's the question.
Are you familiar with RPC?
No.
So RPC stands for remote procedure call or remote protocol call, or I think remote procedure call.
Yes.
So it's basically a client calling into some remote location and calling some sort of procedure. And the small g in front of it is basically Google's. So Google remote protocol or remote procedure call. And there's been lots of different implementations around that. SignalR is not built on top of gRPC, although it does. SignalR does use RPC because the various protocols that we had mentioned before, such as WebSockets and stuff like that, is remote procedure calls.
So yeah, is RPC like the same as WebSockets? Like they're both living at this level?
They're both lower level. Like yes. So that is my time. I do have a link here. I'm gonna also I've created a URL list. I'm gonna paste that in the private chat so that you have it, and then from that private chat, you guys can then share it here with all of our friends.
Awesome.
And this is various links for SignalR, Blazor WebAssembly, C#9, the app itself, the SignalR spec docs, a SignalR talk that I gave. This was recorded at NDC. I also had given this talk at DevReach, a few other places. A link to the .NET Doc Show, which I'm a co-host of. The photo album that we were checking out at the very beginning. A few other fun bits. So with that, hopefully that's a good introduction, kind of setting the groundwork for this 4-day marathon. I'm super excited to have been on. I really am humbled by all of the amazing attendees, and I'm happy to have been a part. So thank you, Ed. Thank you, Alyssa.
Thanks so much, David. I also wanted to share with you real quick. And again, I'm not trying to torpedo your example, because that was how you did it in up until the latest version of Blazor. This was added in 5.0. So in 5.0, you can simply call on the reference to an element and say focus async, and it will do that JavaScript interrupt bit for you. So it's built into the framework now. There's a couple other little convenience features that were added. That was one of them.
So can I use that at ref? What type is that? Is that just the name then at that point in time? Because I'm curious, since I have the code behind with my shadowed component, what type do I actually specify? Because I want to call that uninitialize.
So the ref will be of the, that's a good question. It's going to be element reference. There it is. It's going to be element reference unless it is a specific component, then you can actually make it the component's type. But since you're doing something with a native element, it's going to be element reference.
Message input. I'm literally coding it up right now.
Let's see. We can share that if you want.
Yeah, let me share that. Share.
This is the fun part about like live streaming and live coding, is we can.
All right,
we
so
can just do
message
this type of stuff.
Chat messages, container. So that's the container. Minimize that. This is where we actually post the messages. So here's our input. So rather than having an ID, you say I need to do at ref.
Yep.
Ref, and then input message, which is the type I specified back here, which is an element reference, right?
Yep.
And then down here, instead of calling my wonky JavaScript bits right here, focus element, I'm going to press buttons and hope for the best. Await this dot focus async.
I can't remember exactly. Element ref might need. No, it can be a field. I was going to say it may need to be a property. A field is okay. A field should work.
We'll find out if it focuses or not, and then I can blame you.
Yep. And then I'll blame Code Magazine where I found it.
Come on, let's go. It's doing something, right?
While you're doing that, I'm going to share that Code Magazine article that I just referenced, if anybody wants to check out what the updates were with .NET 5.
Come on.
Every time you start your server, it's like magic. Are you pressing a button or running a command? Like,
I am pressing F5.
oh, okay.
So I'm not touching anything. I'm waiting to see where focus occurs. Come on. Start. It wants me to log in because I logged out. Oh.
Lols.
Wait, it focused. It focused. Ta-da!
Oh.
Yeah, it did. It worked. Totally worked. It worked. That worked. All right, check this out. Now we're just gonna go ahead and save, oh gosh, here we go. Get, check out this, get boarding. Oh, all these changes I made. Oh, get stash, get, check out.
Oh, I love this. This is so fun.
Get stash pop.
Oh my gosh.
No, get
That's popping.
get stash pop lock and drop it. Oh my gosh, so many conflicts. I need to do, okay, get pum, get pull upstream master first. Oh my lord. Well, I broke everything because of source control. So I think with that, I'm going to spend 5 minutes cleaning that up. But that's cool. Thank you for sharing that with me. Now I know, and hopefully they'll keep adding to Blazor and doing some of those more common scenarios, like, focusing elements and not requiring everyone to have to do that themselves.
Yeah, there were some little things like that, and then there were some bigger things like file upload capabilities were added.
Nice.
That was a real nice one. So there's some gems in .NET 5 with Blazor now. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. It seems as though he cut out a little bit, right?
I think so. We might have just.
I think he was just thanking me and telling me how amazing I am and how much
beautiful you are. Come on, let's not forget that.
Oh God.
No, but
that was strange.
Yeah.
Am I back now?
Yeah,
you're back. You're gonna have to watch the replay because it was classic. We had a good time.
I was getting everybody, and then all of your screens went off. but I could still hear you talking.
Oh, so you heard the jokes. You heard the jokes.
Yeah. But I do appreciate you coming and helping us kick this off.
Awesome.
In the links that we just shared a minute ago, is your Git repo in those links?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I say that with confidence, right? I think so.
I think I still have it on my clipboard. Let me double check.
I'm still sharing my screen too. Let me pull up. Let me press
no,
buttons.
I don't have it on my clipboard.
URL list. My Git. Well, the SignalR chat GitHub, the repo for the entire thing, but then it's got all my other stuff in there too.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
So
people can find the code for that project. If
people
they
can
want
find
to check that out.
other things.
And I love how you said the chat, the obligatory chat program is the most boring example of SignalR, because that's where we're going to start today.
Mine was so much better, so now I just broke
It
your
was.
intro.
So I think we're going to use that as kind of a launching point to build our app, which we haven't really talked about yet, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Awesome.
I want you all to know that I have A, never seen it before, and B, was not bored. So I think a lot of times as speakers, when we're doing something and teaching something over and over again to us, we're like, oh, this is old hat. But like, I think there was quite a few people in the audience, as well as myself, who first timers really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that's why I thought it was awesome that you jumped in, Alyssa, with some fresh eyes on the subject, because like I said, David and I go way back. So we've both worked with SignalR and stuff in the past. I did an app. It had to have been about 9 years ago, because it was beta when I was playing around with it and doing stuff. So we kind of know the ins and outs. And sometimes when you're that deep
gloss
in, you
over
forget
things.
you gloss over the
say
simple
words like
questions that
Protocols and deserialized and interop.
And now we know what JSON is.
Okay, that was funny. I do not believe you know what the acronym stands for.
Come on.
then you can argue if it's pronounced Jason or Jason,
Yeah.
which Douglas Crockford, the gentleman that coined that term, says Jason.
Jason. It's Jason, like a person. Like
So-
the name. Yep.
I would say Jason, kind of going with the guy that created it and all.
Right. I would say JavaScript object notation, because I'm a loser. Cool. Well, thanks for having me. I got to drop. I'll probably poke back in, maybe not.
All right.
Suspense. All right. Bye,
Feel
friends.
free. Take care, David. Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.